Korean War happened in between 1950 and 1953. Korean War was a conflict between the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, which we all know nowadays as North Korea, and the Republic of Korea, which is South Korea, in which at least 2.5 million persons lost their lives. The war reached international proportions in June 1950 when North Korea, supplied and advised by Soviet Union, invaded the South. The United Nations, with the United States as the principal participant, joined the war on the side of the South Koreans, and obviously China came to North Korea's aid. After more than 1 million combat casualties has been suffered on both sides, the fighting ended in July 1953, with Korea still divided into two hostile states. Negotiations in 1954 produced no further agreement, and the front line has been accepted ever since as the de facto boundary between North and South Korea, the 38 degrees latitude. Technically the war is still happening because the war didn't end, was not finalized with certain peace, with a treaty signed by both sides. So technically North Korea and South Korea are still at war. So the Korean War, and you're gonna have some homework at the end. Obviously, the Korean War, one of the biggest involvement of the Americans into a kind of a war to contain communism. Obviously, it was not a war, it was during the Cold War, but not a war, fought against their archenemy, Russia. Nowadays, they have two archenemies, Russia and China, both communists, by the way. So the Korean War, that's a very famous photo, what you see in there. That's why we start with this all the time. The tensions between pro-communist and against communist states was not really limited to the Cold War we know, which was actually happening around Europe, because that was the area where the Americans wanted to control. Remember the Marshall Plan and the Truman Doctrine. They start with the same three letters, TRU. So Trump and Truman, nothing similar between these two. Korea was divided into two states, obviously. North Korea, which was communist and supported by Russia. South Korea, which was anti-communist, and they were kind of right-wing, supported by the Americans. And obviously the two Koreas were divided by the 38 parallel. Both Korean presidents claimed to be the ruler of the whole Korea at that point. Nowadays, again, Koreans are at war technically. It's a very complicated situation right now in North Korea. Kim Jong-un, again, they decided that he's dead or he's in coma. I've read a few articles online last night, and they said that his sister is taking power now. I really don't like these kind of things. With the family in power forever, keeping these people captive. It's so sad when you think of that. I've been in such a communist country with such a stupid rule, and that's not good. Anyway, the change will come from these people if they want to make it. Coming back to the Korean War, in 1950s, in exactly 1950, North Korea invaded South Korea. Who knows who's the guy in the center of the photo in there?
MacArthur?
Yes, it's the General MacArthur. Well done. Very good. The United Nations, so basically this Korean War was a war made with kind of with the help of the United Nations, because when a country wants to actually attack another country and make it sounds like, you know, a good thing, we're doing a good thing, look, we're helping people or something, they really want to do it through one of the main organizations, which in this case was the United Nations, which in a way, in respect, the United Nations was the one to fill the void after the League of Nations collapsed, and we know why League of Nations collapsed. So the United Nations asked the members to help stop the war because North Koreans invaded South Koreans, which was quite a bold move from these people. The USA immediately sent troops. They were really kind of like in the loop. They wanted to be in there and do that. And they were followed by troops from 16 other countries, but really the other 16 other countries, they didn't count in the economy of this. It was a war between the Americans and the North Koreans, okay? Obviously, North Koreans were helped by their friends and allies. They always friends, which would be the communist China. Anyway, the American army were led by the general, this famous general, General MacArthur. He played the most important role in this war, and he made decisions, obviously together with his President Truman, not really alone. So, but they were together a formidable power because they had heaps of power, really, literally. Even nowadays, the American president is a person you don't want to mess with, even if it's just like the laughingstock of the entire planet. Trump still has the power, and hence this makes him very dangerous. Anyway, a total of 50% of the army and 86% of the navy was provided by the Americans. So you can see that they were really into the war, because the other 16 countries provided the rest. MacArthur took orders from Truman, not from the UN. Excuse my spelling, not from the United Nations. So, which is a very interesting thing to say. So his allegiance was to USA, not United Nations. They were not there to impose the peace wanted by the United Nations. They were there for their own immediate benefit, which was to stop the communism from happening, from spreading. Again, boys, we're going to do these lessons, Korean War, Cuban Missile Crisis, and Vietnam War, to just look into this area, but it's not going to be lesson after lesson after lesson. We're going to finish this week for sure with all three events. Obviously, you'll have to study a lot around these three events. Hopefully, we're going to see each other next Monday, because I don't think we're going to go back on Thursday. We'll see today at 1 o'clock. And if we see each other next Monday, that will be fantastic, because we can start with the real deal in this one, which is past papers and how to write this exam, which is not really about content. That's why we don't look too much into content. It's more about how to write this, because there will be heaps of sources in there. So you need to know the content, you need to know what happened, and you need to actually interpret the sources. So that would be cool. I have a very good source exercise for you, so you'll understand everything perfectly. So coming back to the lesson, key point, intervention in Korea was carried out with United Nations support, but it was really an American attempt of stopping communism from spreading. So you have to remember this. This is probably the most important thing to get from the Korean War. We're not so interested in the technicalities of war, what happened in which day and what time. Rather, we are very interested in why the Americans were there. What was the point of them being there? And how did they want to actually stop this war from happening? So obviously, you know things about Korean War. How many of you have watched that long series on TV? An old one, obviously. It's a comedy called MASH. Do you know about that?
My dad watched it.
Of course, dads will watch that, and they should be congratulated for that.
All 11 seasons, sir.
Good man. Good
best
man.
one.
It's such a good comedy and such a good thing. Of course, it's not too much about the war, actually, because these people in the MASH unit are a medical emergency ambulance unit, okay? But it's such a funny movie. It's really, really funny. It's a really funny series, a series where not too many bad things are happening, and you just laugh. It's not a smart movie to have to think or something. You just relax and laugh. It's quite cool. Anyway, that's about the Korean War. Well done, Chris. So now, domino effect. Obviously, you know about this. I'm sure you know about this. But if you don't know, you learn it now. It's probably one of the most important things in this whole discussion with the USA containing communism. Americans saw the invasion by North Korea as another example of the spread of communism, which had to be stopped. Now, they come up with this domino effect theory. Domino will be this game you play, and you know, they've done this with cards too, when you put the cards and they just fall one after another. So the idea was, if the China in the left, you can see China in the left, has fall for communism, then they will fall over Korea, Korea over Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, all that part of Asia, which is strategically so important, will fall under communism, and then it's going to be very difficult to change it. So that was the American theory, the domino effect. If one country fell to communism, this would trigger other countries to fall. That's on a short, the domino theory. You need to know about this. Please remember this. It's so simple and so easy to remember. Another reason for America's concern was that in 1949, China had become communist, and they started their famous, no, I shouldn't say famous, infamous cultural revolution and all that stuff, and the Great Leap Forward and so many other things. And you can see what communist China can do nowadays. They are a very strong country, powerful country, very difficult to deal with this country. Only crazy Trump can deal with China in their own terms, because if you look into their president and the way they are very aggressive in the South China Sea, you can see that Xi Jinping looks very, very similar with Donald Trump. There's not too much of a difference between these two people. He's not so vocal, and so it doesn't look so, like a joker, but he's from the same category, believe me. They are both the same. Anyway, the main events of the Korean War, the North Koreans made advances in South Korea. Simple. That's the first main event. Then in September 1950, the big scary guy arrived. MacArthur landed at Incheon. Why he was such a scary guy? He was very, very famous for his stubbornness. He was extremely good in terms of strategical thinking and stuff. So he was the man to deploy in there. You know, you need someone to deploy to take control of the entire thing. So he was not afraid to be in the middle of the fight. So his enemies were really impressed by General MacArthur. In October 1950, look at that, month after month, the United Nations approved an American invasion of North Korea. That was the green light for General MacArthur, and they approved the unification of Korea. The American troops invaded North Korea in the same day. And then the next main event will be the MacArthur's forces advance through North Korea towards the Korea-China border, which is on the far north of North Korea. So you can see these are the main events. The next one will be in November 50. I don't think you finished. It was not enough time, so I will stay a little bit more on this one. So basically, the Americans were present in North Korea. The domino theory said that China will kind of take over North Korea, which happened, and then they will take over North Vietnam, which happened, and then they will take over South Vietnam, which happened. But this is the extent on where domino theory goes. It was this theory was proven wrong. The other countries, they didn't fall under communism. So maybe it was because of the Americans' efforts and whatever implication in all these countries, but nevertheless, the theory didn't work. Domino effect theory didn't work till the bitter end. So it was a kind of, yeah, just an idea of the Americans, which was not really happening. It was half happening, okay? So in the fifth event, in November 50s, following General MacArthur going towards the border, Chinese troops poured into North Korea and drove MacArthur back. They didn't necessarily have the technology, but they had the numbers. MacArthur asked Truman to use the atomic bomb. That was, probably you didn't know that, but that was a fact, and wanted to invade China. So he wanted to bomb that region in China, close to the border. In April 1951, because he asked Truman to use the atomic bomb, he was fired, sacked. It's a very interesting story. We don't have time to look into the story, but actually Truman sacked MacArthur. He fired him. And in June the same year, 51, a stalemate had developed around the 38th parallel. Stalemate, Chris will know exactly what's a stalemate, but let's call it just a timeout. We are in equal positions. You don't attack me, I don't attack you. It's nothing you can do. We are blocked. And in 1953, an armistice was signed, and Korea remained divided along the 38th parallel. And that was the war, basically. Of course, if you'll do some other paper, or if you'll follow history on the university, you'll do more of these. There is a lot of information to talk about in this war, but you don't need to know all that stuff. We need to know just how the Americans were kind of involved in Korea and why they were involved in Korea. It was another attempt to stop the spread of communism. And obviously the spread of communism, which will be kind of will happen through the Comintern, Communist International, which will be obviously there was not something which we didn't know. The communists declared that they want to do this, you know, to continue spreading communism all over the world. That was the main objective and the main target. So the Americans were not crazy 100%. They understood the difficulty of the moment. And anyway, communism was there. Communism is here. Remember that two of the most populous countries and strongest country on the planet are communists. So if you think now in terms of power, military power, in terms of economic power and stuff like that, the world is dominated by communists because the Americans are on one side, the UK doesn't count, France doesn't count, Australia, New Zealand, we don't count really. It's just the Americans in terms of humongous power. On the other side, we have Russians and Chinese, which are both extremely strong countries. So we can say that in this moment, one of the most important philosophy on the planet is communism. It's not capitalism per se. We live in a capitalist country, but it's really not something to deny, okay? So communism is there and it's there to stay and it's there to spread. So even the attempts of the Americans now in South China Seas are actually attempts to stop China from taking over all these islands and everything in there. Taiwan and Hong Kong, they finished Hong Kong, they took over, and so on. There are so many other countries in there in danger. Yeah, this is happening again. It's history coming back. Anyway, let's see. Results of the Korean War. Interesting, because we have to talk about this. America realized that it could not take on China because China had this massive population. It was the same thing like, that happened in the World War II boys, because we know that. Who had the decisive action and who actually changed decisively the war against Hitler and determined the outcome of World War II, and that was Russia, Soviet Union. And not necessarily because they were extremely brave, they defended themselves at Stalingrad and all these areas, but they had the numbers. They had the winter, obviously, of course, but also they have the numbers. Remember, the Russians, they lost approximately 13 to 14 million soldiers, twice the numbers, more than twice the numbers of the Holocaust. So they had a double Holocaust in terms of their soldiers. And so that's one of the reasons why they received so many countries under their domination on Yalta Conference. It's very simple. It's not so unheard of. So again, in the same way, China was maybe not the best equipped. They didn't have the best equipped army, but they have a massive population. So they will have numbers. And if you have numbers, it doesn't matter really if you are equipped or not. Because even if you are equipped, remember what happened in Normandy on the D-Day when they went on shore and there were like few people, like, I don't know, 20 German soldiers with gun machines, which killed heaps of soldiers, thousands. And then eventually, because of the numbers, they took over the Allies. So numbers always will count. Numbers will count always. So America realized that it couldn't take China, so they just back up. From now on, American policy was to contain the spread of communism rather than trying to defeat it. When you lose a cause, you just try to minimize the impacts and the results. And the Korean War showed how easy it was for a regional conflict to suddenly escalate and cause a world war. They were really close. If Truman will approve a nuclear bomb on China, that will cause a world war, because obviously Soviet Union will jump to help China, and then many other countries will try to jump to help the Americans, and so on. That will degenerate in a world war. Russia accused the USA of using the UN for its own purpose, which actually happened. I'm not an admirer of Russia. I'm not an admirer of the USA. A historian should look strictly into the business. From what you've learned until now in the lesson, it's clear that the USA used United Nations to achieve what they wanted, which was really to invade Korea and keep communism at bay. So the results will be very simple. We're going to have the same type of system in North Korea, the same type of system in South Korea. They will both be controlled by different countries, respectively China and USA. And yeah, that will be it. So basically, this is the Korean War on a fast forward, because we cannot go in very much details. That's not the point of this paper. This exam will look into your abilities to discuss sources and write about all this stuff. We're going to go there very soon. Any questions about the Korean War, boys? Homework is there. It's called the Korean trigger, not tiger, okay? Trigger. So you need answers on the next slide. You don't want to look into that to answer this. And then, yeah, that will be your homework. Name 2 ways in which South and North Korea differed. Of course, I'm not interested in things like they have more access to the sea, or they have. I'm interested in political, ideological stuff. Actually, access to the sea is not bad as a major factor, because that will give you strategical advantage. How did China play an important part in the war? Please explain that. Obviously, I would love to see paragraphs, because it's not enough just to say China helped North Korea. Yeah, it's technically okay, but normally you should write a little bit better, because you want to impress the examiners. And then give 3 results of the war. You have some results of the war in there we discussed, but it's up to you to do it, okay? And so we'll stop here, and we're gonna do the card for this specific thing. So we're gonna do a card to see how we can actually put this together.